She was 21, days away from graduation, full of dreams and plans for the future. But one February night in 2017, her path crossed with a man who should never have been free. By morning, she was gone. This isn't just the story of a murder. It's the story of how a single night exposed the cracks in an entire justice system. To understand what happened to Reagan Tokes, you need to know every detail, from the life she lived to the terror she faced and the law that now carries her name. And once you start this story, you won't be able to look away. Reagan Delaney Tokes was born in 1995 in Toledo, Ohio, and from childhood, she carried a kind of light people never forgot. Her parents called her the joy of their lives. Teachers saw her as focused and determined, and friends remembered her as the girl who could sit with anyone and make them feel important. At Anthony Wayne High School, she was a natural leader, not because she sought attention, but because her kindness drew people in. And by graduation, she already knew what she wanted: to study psychology and one day use it to help others. At Ohio State University, she threw herself into her studies, balancing lectures and exams with long shifts at Bodega Cafe downtown, where customers noticed her smile and co-workers admired her calmness under pressure. Life was busy, but she loved it. Late-night food runs with friends, spontaneous adventures, and phone calls home that kept her tied to her family. By 2017, she was a senior, months from graduation, with plans for graduate school, a career in psychology, and maybe a move to a new city. She had worked hard for 4 years, and her future looked bright. To everyone who knew her, she was dependable, compassionate, and full of promise. The kind of daughter, sister, and friend who celebrated your victories louder than you did yourself, and stood with you when life felt heavy. Yet beneath the ordinary rhythm of her days, something unseen was approaching. A shadow waiting in Columbus, a dangerous man whose path was about to cross hers. In the weeks before February 2017, nothing seemed unusual. Classes, shifts, laughter, and plans for tomorrow. But the storm was already gathering, and Reagan, full of dreams and standing on the edge of adulthood, had no way of knowing that her tomorrow would never come. On the night of February 8, 2017, Reagan finished her shift at Bodega Cafe in Columbus, just like countless other nights before. Tired but content, ready to head home after hours of serving customers and laughing with co-workers. Yet fate had already written a different ending for her. As she walked to her car, she had no idea she was being watched by Brian Golsby, a man recently released from prison with a long history of violent crimes, a man who should have been under close monitoring, but instead roamed free. In that moment, the normal routine of a college senior became the beginning of a nightmare. Golsby forced his way into her car, taking control not just of the wheel, but of Reagan's final hours. He drove her around Columbus, robbing her of her freedom, her safety, and her chance to live the life she had dreamed of. What happened next was brutal. She was sexually assaulted, terrified and alone, trapped by someone who had no mercy. Then, as if all he had already taken was not enough, Golsby led Reagan to a quiet, dark park in Grove City. In those final moments, far from the noise of the city, her voice was silenced by gunfire. By morning, Reagan's body was discovered in the park, and what had been the hopeful journey of a young woman about to graduate became a crime scene that shocked Ohio and the nation. For her family and friends, the nightmare was only just beginning, as the news of her disappearance turned into confirmation of her murder. A city that had once represented her future now stood as the place where her future was stolen, and the world that knew Reagan as light and joy now had to face the darkness that had extinguished her too soon. The discovery of Reagan's body turned Columbus into a city on edge, and investigators wasted no time piecing together the trail of evidence that would lead them to her killer. Detectives studied surveillance footage, gathered witness statements, and most importantly, traced the GPS ankle monitor of a man who should never have been free to roam the streets. Brian Golsby. The monitor showed his movements on the night of February 8th, and the map overlapped chillingly with Reagan's final route, her abduction, and the park where her body was found. It was proof hiding in plain sight. Every step of his crime was recorded by a device meant to protect the public, yet it had done nothing to stop him. When Golsby was arrested, the evidence was overwhelming. Stolen items belonging to Reagan, DNA that matched the crime, and a record of violence stretching back years. In court, prosecutors painted the picture of a predator who had taken advantage of a broken system, a man given freedom when he had already proven he was a danger to women. As the trial unfolded, the details were almost too painful for Reagan's family to hear. The reality of her final hours laid bare before strangers. But in the end, justice was delivered. Brian Golsby was convicted of kidnapping, rape, robbery, and murder, and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The verdict brought a measure of relief, yet it could not bring Reagan back. For her family, the courtroom victory was only a reminder of the future stolen, the graduation she never reached, and the dreams she never lived. Still, there was power in the truth being told, power in knowing the monster who had taken her life would never hurt another innocent soul again. In the aftermath of the trial, Reagan's family carried a weight no verdict could ever lift. But they refused to let her story end in silence, and from their grief emerged a movement for change. The details of her murder exposed deep flaws in the justice system. A violent offender, fresh out of prison, wearing a GPS ankle monitor, had still been able to stalk, abduct, and kill a young woman full of promise. The outrage in Ohio was immediate and powerful. How could such a system fail so completely? Lawmakers listened, and soon the Reagan Tokes Act was introduced, a bill designed to reform sentencing and improve supervision of released offenders. The law gave judges more flexibility to keep dangerous criminals in prison longer, strengthened post-release monitoring, and demanded accountability from parole officers and state agencies. It was a promise that Reagan's death would not be in vain, that her name would stand for change and protection. For her family, it was a small comfort. Though Reagan would never walk across the graduation stage, never build the career she dreamed of, her legacy would now guard others from harm. Across Ohio, people learned her name, not just as a victim, but as a symbol of reform, a reminder that systems must serve the innocent, not fail them. Yet behind the legislation and headlines, there was still the quiet daily pain of parents missing their daughter, friends missing their sister, and a campus missing the laughter that once filled its classrooms. The Reagan Tokes Act was a step toward justice for the future, but for those who loved her, the wound remained open. Proof that even laws cannot heal the hole left by a life stolen too soon. Today, years after her murder, Reagan Tokes is remembered, not for the horror of her final night, but for the light she carried every day of her short life, a light her family, friends, and community still keep alive. On Ohio State's campus, her name echoes in memorials, scholarship funds, and vigils, where students gather to honor the classmate who should have walked with them at graduation. In her hometown, her memory lingers in stories told by friends who recall her laughter, her kindness, and her way of making everyone feel seen. The Reagan Tokes Act stands as a permanent reminder that change was forged through her tragedy, protecting others who might have been left vulnerable. Yet the truest legacy is personal. Parents who carry her in every heartbeat, friends who live a little kinder because of her example, and strangers who hear her story and are moved to demand a safer world. Reagan's life was more than her death. It was ambition, love, and promise. Though she never had the chance to chase all the dreams she held, her name now inspires others to dream in her place, to fight for justice, and to never forget that. Behind every headline is a human being, a daughter, a sister, a friend. And so, while her story ends too soon, it refuses to fade, because Reagan Tokes remains, in memory and in legacy, a symbol of both heartbreak and hope. This was the story of Reagan Tokes. A life full of dreams, stolen too soon. If you want to hear more true crime stories like this, don't forget to subscribe, share, and stay connected for the next chapter.